Hello, Tampa Bay fans. You're listening to The William Haynes Show, your online radio home for Tampa Bay sports talk and Rays postgame shows. Stay tuned throughout baseball season for live coverage after most Rays games with comprehensive coverage of all 162 games from April through October. Got something to say? We'd love to hear it. Give us a call, internationally toll-free. 877-566-1020 or send us a tweet at WHBC Official. Don't go anywhere. Tonight's program will be starting in just a couple of minutes.
HBC. On a night where the Rays turn back the clock on some late-game heroics, they leave the tying run just 90 feet away. It is a good evening to you, and how you be. William Haynes here, you there, here at 11:12 on this Friday night. This Rays postgame edition of the William Haynes Show is live from the WHBC studio in Clearwater, Florida. The Rays fall 5-4 to the Texas Rangers in Arlington, their first time playing in Globe Life Field for the first time since the 2020 World Series, and of course a lot of memories brought back really anyway, no matter what happened in the game. But of course Brett Phillips batting with the tying run on base in the top of the ninth inning, I think gave us all kind of some chills. The radio broadcasters were kind of cracking some fun about the moment. And lo and behold, Brett Phillips came through once again with a 2 RBI single that put the tying run just 90 feet away. That was Taylor Walls, and up comes Brandon Lau in the top of the order. And Brandon Lau did what he has done a little bit too often here lately, which was to strike out. He was chasing the fastball high. There was also a swing and a miss at a curveball low in that sequence. Pretty much the closer, Ian Kennedy, having his way with Brandon Lau, as Kyle Gibson did a little bit earlier in the game. And that's certainly a big part of what's maybe going wrong with this team. They had a two-game winning streak going that was snapped tonight, I believe. And they find themselves back just 14 games above 500. Well, that's still good enough for first place in the AL East. And I think you give them a little bit of credit. They came down from 5-0. They were down 5-0 after 5 innings. Josh Fleming looked a little bit shaky. Josh Fleming looks about the same each and every start. It's kind of like a Ryan Yarbrough thing where sometimes the guys are going to hit it and hit it well, and sometimes they won't. And tonight in Arlington, it seemed like the Rangers were finding their stroke against Fleming, and over 7 innings, Texas had 10 hits against him. So I think you would easily say probably the worst career start for Flem, but 7 innings, 5 runs, definitely saved the bullpen. And talk about bearing the lead. Ryan Yarbrough yesterday in the afternoon game against the New York Yankees, going complete game for the Rays. The first time a Rays pitcher has gone CG since May 15th, 2016. It was Matt Andriese at home against the Oakland Athletics. And unfortunately, I have yet to watch that game. I'm going to watch that and get it in the scorebook probably tonight or tomorrow, and we'll discuss more of that game on tomorrow night's show, where we'll talk about, of course, tomorrow's game and more about that Yankees series and what Yarbrough, I think, kind of means to the Rays, and I think there's some significant discussion to be had there. But getting back to tonight in the present, we will spend the rest of tonight's show discussing tonight's 5-4 loss to the Texas Rangers. Again, they were not great with runners in scoring position. They just go 1 for 7 in that category tonight. They leave 6 men on base. They strike out 9 times, walk only 2. Kyle Gibson, who has been very good this season and had, I believe, 9 consecutive quality starts, which is 6 innings plus of 3 or less runs, and that streak is snapped tonight as he was pitching off the injured list for the first time, and he goes 5 1/3 scoreless. I think the Rays were fortunate to get him out of the game as early as they did, but they were not able to do too much with it. But obviously they made that late game push and were not able to tie it or take the lead against the closer Ian Kennedy, who, to his own credit as well, had not pitched, at least in a safe situation, in quite some time, because the Rangers were on a 9-game losing streak. They came home from an 0-9 road trip, and they had 30,000 plus packed in Arlington tonight. Maybe some of that is, the Friday night or and all that stuff. 77% capacity in Globe Life Field tonight for a team that's 22-36 and dead last in the American League West, and I can't really imagine that changing before season's end. But the fine people at Texas coming out to support them, and it was pretty cool to see all those butts in the seats in Globe Life Field. But there was only about 12,000 during the World Series, so this is the most fans in a game that the Rays have played since the 2019 ALDS. That's how long it's been since they've had a full capacity crowd, because the Rangers are, of course, up 100%, which they pretty much have been since opening day. So that was an interesting element as well, and overall a decent watch. And you want them to come out on top, but I think good just to come back from 5-0, and again, the tying run 90 feet away. Can't bring them in. What else is new? So with that being said, we're going to take a short break. I haven't said it yet, but we would love to hear from some of you guys. Maybe take some callers here tonight if you want to share your thoughts on the race. 877-566-1020. We're taking your calls all night long, at least for the rest of the duration of the program. So give us a call during the break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our discussion in just a few moments.
You're listening to the Rays postgame on the William Haynes Show. We're live most nights within 15 minutes of the final out to break down everything that happened in that day's game and take listener phone calls to get your thoughts. As always, you call the show at 877-566-1020 or tweet the show at WHBCOfficial. Like you to remember that archives of previous shows can be found on this show's page on Speaker.com and also on the WHBC YouTube channel. We look forward to having some of you on the show. Thanks for calling in.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM. Sports Radio 66. Sports Radio
HBC.
And at 11:19, we return on the William Haynes Show. Again, number to call the show, 877-566-1020. This Rays post-game edition of the William Haynes Show, talking tonight's Rays 5-4 loss to the Texas Rangers in Arlington, Texas. So without further ado, for the Rays, this loss drops them to 36-22. They are now 21-9 on the road, which I believe is still the best in the majors, and is still good for just about a game lead in the American League East. With Boston's win over the Yankees tonight brings them within one game of first place. So the Rays' lead in the division is dwindling. For the Rangers, dead last in the AL West, they improved to 22-36 and are an average 13-13. At home for the Rays, it was 4 runs on 10 hits, no errors, and for the Rangers, not much different. 5 runs on 10 hits, no errors defensively for them. Getting the win for Texas, Kyle Gibson is now 4-0 on the season, 5 1/3, scoreless, 5 strikeouts, no walks, and 5 hits. Getting the loss, a lot of decisions for Fleming. It seems like every time he comes in the game, he gets a decision. He is now 5-4 on the year with tonight's loss. In his 7 innings of work, allowed 5 runs on 2 strikeouts, no walks. That was about the only thing really that he had going for him. And of course, all 10 hits that the Rangers had were against Josh Fleming tonight. And Ian Kennedy got his 12th save of the season in that 2-run 9th inning that he pitched in 2 hours and 47 minutes. And in front of a paid attendance, 77% capacity, 30,635. The starting lineup that Kevin Cash put out tonight: defense first, and the outfield from left to right, it was Austin Meadows in left, Kevin Kiermaier in center, Brett Phillips in right, and then in the infield from third to first, it was Joey Wendell at third, Taylor Walls at shortstop, Brandon Lau at second, Yandy Diaz played first, Francisco Mejia the catcher, and Randy Arozarena was the DH. A couple of changes, things that have been mixed up. G-Man Choi today was placed on the 10-day injured list with left groin tightness. It was listed as Kevin Cash basically connected it front out. The arthroscopic knee surgery that he had on his right knee, connected that with the groin, the left groin issue. And I've been there, as a football player, it's kind of the same thing. If you've got an injury or something that's nagging you, and you tend to kind of favor other body parts, and you might play a little bit differently, so on and so forth, you're putting stresses on parts of your body that was not previously meant to handle it. And again, I don't mean to make this some kind of medical lecture, but that's just my take on it, and I would tend to agree with Cash that they are somewhat connected. There was an issue, I think, with the knee, that it was a little bit tender about a week ago, and he was day to day, but I think only missed a day, if that. It might have even pinch hit late in the game the next day. When I saw the news that initially, last week, I figured he was going to get an IL stint. He did not. And I think some other people, along with myself, could kind of read between the lines that something had to give. The Rays were playing him just about every day because Choi gave the Rays no other choice, just because of how well he was hitting, and including in clutch situations, so on and so forth. So he kind of forced the Rays' hand in that way. Maybe if he had been a little bit more pedestrian, he's tended to be a little bit of a slow starter in his career. Maybe he would have been more of a platoon guy, and that could have given him more of a chance. But obviously, the Rays training staff and everything knows what they're doing. I don't mean to question that necessarily, but Choi is going to spend some time on the injury list. We don't know if it's going to be the minimum 10 days. They backdated it to yesterday. So if that's not anything more than a clerical thing, you would be led to believe that it would be a shorter stint. But if he's not able to recover fully, or they want to shut him down again, then you're talking weeks, maybe a month plus. But we really don't know. It all is just speculation at this point. And with Choi on the injured list, things pretty much go back to square one, where they were at the beginning of the season, where you had Yandy Diaz and Mike Brasso, basically a righty-lefty platoon at first. The only thing different is that Yoshi Tsutsugo is no longer in the picture, obviously, so it is more of a straight-up platoon, not more of a kind of three-way battle for the position, if you will. So it looks like it's going to be mainly Yandy Diaz. I think he's the guy that's looked best over there. And I think you look on the other side of that coin, and that opens the door back up for Joey Wendell to get more everyday playing time. Not necessarily that he was starving from playing time, but with Taylor Walls kind of taking over the shortstop position, Choi at first base moved Yandy to third. And so, with the third base, shortstop, and second base positions taken up, Wendell did kind of find himself somewhat surprisingly being the odd man out, being one of the best hitters that the Rays have, and he's probably still leading the majors in doubles and is batting near 300. So the fact that you can get a guy like that more everyday playing time, I think it will end up being a good thing. He has been on a bit of a slump lately. He really did have a tough series in the Bronx against the Yankees, but I'm sure he'll get things turned around in no time. So Choi is going to be out, and it looks like, as it was tonight, Yandy more at first. Wendell, will get everyday time at third. Walls will continue to play at shortstop, and now Brasso, if anyone, would be kind of the odd man out. And I think he'll probably be in somewhat a platoon spot, whether at first and third. And the fact that he can play both of those positions along with second, first, second, and third, keeps the door open for him. Although he was 0 for 2 tonight, coming off the bench as a pinch hitter with 2 strikeouts and an average that's down to 178. And I don't mean to really hate on him right now or anything, but he looks pretty putrid at the plate tonight, as he has really most of the season, as the 178 average would indicate, a 261 on base. So he is not doing a whole heck of a lot. With Choi going on the IL, they had to make a corresponding move, of course, and they chose to activate Ryan Sheriff, the left-handed pitcher from Durham. If you'll recall, he has only had one appearance this season. It was on April 2nd down in Miami against the Marlins. He inherited some base runners, gave up a hit that allowed them to score, and then after the game, he had, I guess, notified the team that he was going to be taking some time away, and it was, I guess we were led to believe it was a mental health thing. There ended up being a Sports Illustrated article that talked about mainly Ryan Sheriff, but also some other players in their battle with mental health playing baseball. And Mark Tompkin did a specific article in the Tampa Bay Times that had basically discussed that Ryan Sheriff, in that moment on the mound with his team, I believe, leading, or it was tied with men on base, he said he felt no competitive fire, whatsoever. And obviously, if you're a pitcher, if you've heard Tyler Glasnow talk about this at all, that's a huge part. And I'm sure anyone that's played any kind of sport at any kind of level, you would understand really how frightening that lack of competitive fire or spirit would be for someone like that, and especially with a guy like Sheriff that's making his livelihood off of this, that maybe it would be for the best of his career to take some time off, and he did that. Ended up just being on the restricted list for a while, and then when they activated him, he had to go through AAA Durham and spent some time there, and I believe has been pretty good. Going into the season, we viewed Ryan Sheriff as probably the best lefty specialist out of the bullpen, along with Cody Reed. Cody Reed as well, who we had not discussed since the news came out. He did end up having thoracic outlet syndrome surgery. It was something that I had hinted at. I had heard whispers of it, and I think anyone that's familiar with it could kind of connect the dots. He had spent 2 or 3 trips on the injured list with a left thumb issue, the throwing hand, the left side. And I think last year when he went on the IL, we were led to believe it was a blister or some kind of more physical issue, but it ended up being a nerve thing. If you're familiar with thoracic outlet syndrome, I looked into it a little bit in spring training when we were talking about Chris Archer, and it's a nerve issue that can run from your neck and your shoulder all the way down into your hand and into your fingers with kind of a numbness. And obviously, if that's on your throwing side especially, that's going to be problematic. And so in Reed's case, he did have the surgery. They had to take out a rib because the rib, I guess, was pressing down on the nerve endings, not to get too technical, and that was causing this issue to occur. So he is going to miss the rest of the season. I'm talking about Cody Reed. It is believed that Reed will be back in time for spring training next year, but for a guy that the Rays were propping up in spring training of this season as a guy that could be a multiple inning weapon out of the bullpen and a guy that's great against righties and lefties, blah, blah, blah. He's out of the picture. Keep in mind that the Rays are going to have some guys coming back here somewhat shortly. Chaz Rowe, probably the most... the guy that we'll be seeing more quickly. He's already in AAA Durham in a rehab assignment, Chaz Rowe. And then, of course, Oliver Drake is working his way back. Nick Anderson is starting to throw again, and we've been told during this whole process that he'll be back probably sometime in August. So reinforcements are on the way. So Cody Reed, thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, will miss the rest of the year. But Ryan Sheriff does come up in a corresponding move where they put Choi on the IL. And we did see Ryan Sheriff pitch in a scoreless eighth inning here tonight. And I thought he did look pretty good. So good to see him back as a part of the bullpen. And they were lacking some with the left side. Jeffrey Springs, really the main lefty reliever, and he was actually not so great against lefties. So I think now the hope is that they have a true lefty specialist in Ryan Sheriff, and so hopefully he'll continue to have more outings like he did tonight with the scoreless eighth inning. Getting back to tonight's lineup, we talked about the defensive alignment, the way that the batting order was ordered. Brandon Lau led off, followed by Arozarena and Wendell. Austin Meadows hit cleanup, followed by Yanni Diaz and Kevin Kiermaier. The 7-8-9 was Taylor Walls, Francisco Mejia, and Brett Phillips. So against a righty starter in Kyle Gibson, Brandon Lau goes back into the leadoff spot. It looks like, if you can call it this, it's a bit of a platoon now for the leadoff spot instead of a guy that does it every day. Brandon Lau, the left-handed bat, to do it against righties, and Randy Arozarena, the right-handed bat, to lead off against lefties. At least that's how it's looked right now. Another thing that stood out to me, Joey Wendell, who's batted towards the middle and even down at the bottom of the order. I think he hit 7th when we did our show a couple of nights ago. He hit 6th yesterday. So, down towards... really the bottom of the order and kind of his slump, and to one game in, he's basically replaced the role of G-Man Choi, a guy that is more of an average hitter that's supposed to work more decent at bats, things like that kind of archetype. So Joey Wendell is being thrust back into that role that he was in earlier in the season, pre-Choi being healthy, or somewhat healthy, I guess is what we should say now. So it'll be interesting to see if he's up to the test and if he can come back out of the slump. He went 1 for 2 tonight before being pinch hit for, which I wasn't even a huge fan of having Bros come in, but again, that's, cash and the matchups and all those things. So intrigued, to say the least, to see how that will continue, and everything else with what we said with kind of the infield configuration returning to where it was prior to Choi coming off the injured list for the first time this year. I think tonight would be probably a good time to go down 1 through 9 and talk about how everyone's doing at the plate. Not just tonight, but kind of overall, because it's been a little bit since we've done that, getting reacclimated with the team and everything. So Brandon Lau in the leadoff spot. He goes 2 for 5 tonight with a run scored, 2 knocked in. No walks, 2 strikeouts. His 2 for 5 pushes his average back up over the Mendoza line. I believe he was 198 going into the game. He's now at 201 and on base of 316, and his slugging not much better of 387, although he did hit his 10th home run of the season tonight in the 8th inning, a 2-run shot, and then batted again the very next inning for the final out of the game. Keep in mind, Austin Meadows is leading the team with 14 home runs, and that's, not quite at the top, but that's, close in the majors. So that Lau is only 4 home runs behind that. And I guess he hasn't had such a bad power season at the plate. Right now, about a third of the way into the season, you say he's on pace for about 30 home runs, which if you had said that going into the season, I think we'd all be pretty pleased with that, but would like an average perhaps a little bit higher than 201, but that's Hard to say how that's going to continue. We mentioned earlier in the show kind of the flashbacks of having the Rays back in Globe Life Field where they played the 2020 World Series against the Dodgers, and Brandon Lau, I thought, was no exception. He did have such a wretched postseason. Did hit 3 homers in the Fall Classic, though, but outside of that, did not really contribute a whole heck of a lot. With his 2 for 5 tonight, he struck out against Kyle Gibson to start the game, and they went down in order there in the first. He popped up as part of a 1-2-3 in the third. He hit a 1-out single. I believe it was a ground ball in the sixth. He ended up getting over to third base, but did not come in to score. Then in the eighth inning, with a man on first and 1 out, he hit, of course, that 2-run homer. It was 420 feet to right center. It scored Francisco Mejia as well, and at that point in the eighth inning, put the Rays on the board to prevent the shutout and made it a 5-2 ball game, which I think really paved the way for at least that run at a comeback in the ninth inning. And of course, baseball being a sport of failure as it is, to have a guy like that maybe come through twice in a row. Of course, when he's only hitting 201, basically 20%, 2 out of every 10, obviously rolling the dice that to get a hit back to back is not very likely. So just playing the math aspect of it, that at bat where he hit the home run, it was off of a righty, Josh Spores. So no success against the lefty tonight. The Rangers did play a lefty for an inning and 2/3, John King, and Brandon Lau did not see him. So just righties between Gibson, Spores, and Ian Kennedy. But the home run at bat, it was up 2-1. He was getting mainly fastballs up and in the entire at bat. And this is a good opportunity to talk about the home plate umpire Alfonso Marquez, who was calling a wide strike zone, to say the least. It seemed like all the lefty hitters, whether it was Gibson or even Kennedy late in the game, those fastballs high and away that were a baseball or so off the plate were being called for strikes. There was an at-bat to Phillips where usually during the game, I got the headphones in. I'm just kind of sitting at the computer with the scorebook. I'm not saying anything. I'm just quiet, keeping to myself. I audibly groaned at the called strike 3, Brett Phillips, and I rarely do that, if at all, during a season, especially a regular season game. The call just to punch out Phillips was that egregious, and I'm not a guy that likes to moan and groan about umpires, but there was a horrible strike 3 call to Brett Phillips that was probably 2 baseballs below the kneecaps. That was definitely received well by Jose Trevino, especially when you compare that to the work that Gary Sanchez did in the Bronx earlier this week. And it's funny to see some catchers do it much better than others. That was, if not for the framing, it would not have been strike 3. But Brandon Lau also had some moments where he was taking fastballs that he should have, that were outside the zone, that were being called strikes. So that did put him in a tough position where he had to go chase some. Not that he needs any excuse to go chase those fastballs. And what was funny in that home run at bat, took 2 fastballs up and away, 2-1, then chased the fastball high and away for strike 2, fouled the fastball off with 2 strikes, and then got a fastball kind of middle, but it was drifting upwards. It was on that trajectory, and he deposited into the visiting bullpen 420 feet to right center field, again, to put the Rays on the board and make it a 5-2 ball game. So that was his production tonight, and of course, in the ninth inning, runners at the corners, in a 5-4 game, Taylor Walls, the tying run at third base, and he strikes out against Ian Kennedy in 3 pitches. Fastball. So, swung through a fastball up and away, but was in the zone for strike 1. Took a fastball down and away, that at least what I'm looking at is probably a strike. And then on an 0-2 count, a fastball up and away that looked to be a baseball high, at least. chased it. I understand in that situation you have to protect, especially with Alfonso Marquez, the home plate umpire in the game that he's calling, but that, still doesn't mean that it's not frustrating, and I think this has been an ongoing issue for Lau. The more and more I watch baseball, I understand this is just an integral part of the sport. Every hitter has their weakness, and especially in today's game, they don't want to adapt to their weakness. They just want to play to their strengths, kind of like Austin Meadows has such a linear swing plane that he never changes, and he's always going to absolutely crush down and in pitching, but just about anything else he struggles against. But here he is, June 4th with 14 home runs, talking about Meadows. So that this is kind of what the sport is becoming, and Lau, I wouldn't necessarily call a flawed hitter, but he's having some pretty prolonged struggles. The power numbers aside, 201 average. Clutch numbers, at least to what I can tell, have not been tremendous. Obviously, the 0 for 1 with runners in scoring position tonight. He's been asked to hit at the top of the order pretty much every night. I think not just myself, but a lot of people put expectations on him to be kind of the everyday cleanup hitter, a guy that can hit righties and lefties, because that's what he's done historically in his career. His career average against lefties is only about 30 points lower than against righties. But this year has been absolutely terrible. I mean, at one point, when the struggles were at its worst, he had about an 850, 900 OPS against righties and about a 180 OPS against lefties. I mean, such a disparity that you couldn't. It's hard to believe that they're that far apart. That he's having that much struggles against lefties, but and that's mainly what's contributing to such a low average. But on nights like tonight, not so good against righties either. I think, like I would kind of alluded to earlier, the home run, yes, is good, and they would not have been in an opportunity to tie the game tonight if not for that 2-run homer in the 8th. But when you're the final out of the game and you leave the tying run at third base, I think you're still going to ultimately walk away with kind of the stench of a bad night. And maybe that's just my fault spinning a narrative. You could accuse me of that, but that's just how I see it, at least. Randy Arozarena, the DH tonight, batted second. He went 1 for 4 with no walks and a strikeout, an average that is down to 254, and a bit of a rough stretch for him. He had a rough series as well against the Yankees. Not such a bad getaway game, but everyone had a great game yesterday. And on base, about 100 points higher than an average at 342, so it is very strange for a guy that is so swing happy at the plate that he is working a fair amount of walks and a slugging of 394. So the power numbers for him are not bad either. He grounded out early in the count against Gibson in the first inning at a 1-2-3, struck out to start the fourth, hit a one-out single to make it runners at the corners with 1 out in the 6th, and then flew out to center after Brandon Lau's 2-run shot in the 8th, and that was it for him. He would have come to the plate if Brandon Lau could have gotten at least on base in the 9th inning, but of course Lau was not able to do so. So Arozarena did not have that chance. Yesterday, Randy was 1 for 4. You look back before that, 0 for 4. The day before that, 0 for 5. The day before that, 1 for 4. So you can do the math. He's not on a great stretch right now. Mainly the New York series, but it just seems like he's in a bit of a funk. That night where he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts and the walk, that kind of highlighted his struggles for me. It seems like whenever he's having struggles at the plate, it's just because he's swinging at everything. When he can just take a deep breath, be a little bit patient, take those sliders in the dirt, kind of hunt fastballs, let the pitching come to you. This is something that I meant to bring up during the Yankees series that I think I just kind of missed out on. When the Rays were struggling in that series, it was because mainly the pitching is, talking about Yarbrough's start, or not Yarbrough start, but McClanahan start, and even Glasnow start, which is when those pitchers are at their best, they're dictating the game to their opponent, and when you lose control and things like that, you let the hitter start dictating things. The hitter is making you throw strikes and where they want them, and that's where you run into some issues. And so with Randy Arozarena, I truly believe working walks is a hitter stat. It's not as much a pitcher stat. The hitter, I think, has more control in working the walk, because just because the pitcher is throwing you pitches that aren't strikes doesn't mean that you're not going to swing at them, which is a strike, obviously. So don't give the pitcher a favor and swing at stuff that's not strikes, and that's just what Arozarena is doing right now. I think that the great kind of microcosm of that is just there was a big cut and miss where his batting helmet came off, and I know that's kind of Randy's new kind of signature, or not new, but it's one of his signature traits, is that it doesn't matter what he's doing, the batting helmet is coming off on the base path, in the batter's box, doesn't matter. His hat even comes off in the outfield quite a bit, so he just, whatever it is about the hat, it just doesn't stay on. But that you're swinging out of your shoes, the bat helmet is coming off. I mean, he is really just willy-nilly is the best, for lack of a better term, obviously not very eloquent, but that's the best that I can think to describe it. And so, make the pitcher come to you, because that's when Randy was at his best and setting the records in the postseason with the 10 home runs and everything like that. So if he's going to find his old self, it's going to be going back to that strategy. And by no means is he terrible right now. 254 in the season, still in the running for American League Rookie of the Year, but I think his counter, the man across from him, Adolis Garcia, is probably the front runner for that. But of course, we're just about a third of the way through the season. A lot of things could change. So that was Randy's night. Tonight, not incredibly consequential. I mean, the one time he came up to the plate with a man on base, he hit a single. I think that was just more luck than anything else. I will say, putting the ball on the ground, putting it in play, 3 out of the 4 times was good. That fly out to center was pretty well struck. So that's a step in the right direction for sure, and that's certainly when he's at his best, when he's just putting the ball in play an awful lot. Batting third, the third baseman, Joey Wendell. Tonight, Joey goes 1 for 2, no walks, no strikeouts, an average that's up to 287, and on base at 340. And can you believe a slugging percentage of 489? That's great right now, really. The only one higher than that is Meadows, 542, which is just absolutely absurd, the kind of stretch that he is on. Talking about Meadows, an OPS of almost 900. But for Wendell, grounded out in a 1-2-3 in the first, and then after that, hit a one-out single in the fourth and was called out on the bases. That was a sequence where, one-out single, he's hitting at first. You see Kyle Gibson throw over, and you're like, okay, let's get the at-bat to Meadows going. Throws over again, okay. But each time it was getting a little bit closer, and for whatever reason, Wendell's lead kept getting a little bit larger. I think really the logical takeaway from that is because Wendell had the sign to steal, and Gibson probably knew as much. And one of the pickoff attempts, obviously, he could not get back in time, and he was called out. And that was a moment in time where the Rays were down 1-0 in the top of the fourth. They had Wendell at first and a 3-1 count to Meadows. Okay, so, walk makes it first and second, 1 out with Yandy and Kiermaier coming up, and, maybe you got a run going, and you can put some runs on the board. Wendell gets picked off. Meadows strikes out. 3 men come to the plate in the fourth, and at that point you're like, all right, what are we doing? And then in the bottom of that frame, the Rangers put up 3 on Fleming, and it was 4-0, and that's where basically the wheels came off on the game. And so that was a key sequence. Maybe not on Wendell, because if he gets the sign to steal, he's just following orders to that point. But that was the main play that Wendell was involved in tonight, and I thought looked fine defensively over at third base, as he has really much of all season. He was pinch hit for in the 6th inning with runners at the corners and only one out. That was a situation where that would have been in the 4-0 score, and or rather it was 5-0 at the time against. The reason they made the decision to pinch it was because they had righty-lefty with Wendell against the righty Gibson. Gibson comes out after Wendell, I guess, is announced. They bring in the lefty John King, and so Kevin Cash goes to the bench. The righty Brasso against the lefty John King. Brasso takes a cutter down and in, chases a cutter down and in that was even worse, down 0-2, and then on a 1-2 pitch swings through a changeup that was well placed by Josh King for a strikeout with runners at the corners and one out in a 5-0 ball game in the 6th. And then in the 8th, struck out again, bases empty, 2 outs, but nevertheless, score aside, it was just still a bad at-bat. Just kind of got eviscerated this time by the righty Josh Spores. Swung and missed at a slider, fouled off the same pitch, and swung through it again. So I don't know. You gave him the same pitch 3 times. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. There was a take in that at bat. It was a fastball taken down and in, but outside of that, the sliders just blew him away. So the struggles certainly for Brasso highlighted there with the 0-for-2 and 2 strikeouts off the bench here tonight. Austin Meadows batted cleanup. He hit 1-for-4 with a run scored, no walks, 1 strikeout, an average that's up to 244, and I don't believe he had some kind of award for the month of May. I believe he just had maybe one of the best months of his career, and he, I think, had the American League Player of the Month of May in 2019. So I guess May is just a good month for him. On base right now for 350, and I mentioned the slugging of 542. So that's an OPS of almost 900 as well, which is just incredible for Austin. The average numbers not what I'd want them to be, and I think I'm more frustrated with Meadows than I should, understanding baseball is a game of failure and all that, because it's hard to believe kind of the numbers. When you watch a Rays game, when you watch him play, you're like, oh, what is going on? But then you look at his numbers, 14 home runs, all these RBIs, all these doubles, etc., and you're thinking, wow, this guy is really, a key component. He grounded out to start the 2nd, struck out in that sequence in the 4th where, you had a 3-1 count and Wendell at first, and you end up, Wendell picked off Meadows striking out. So that was a big swing for sure. Flew out to left with runners at the corners and 2 outs in the 6th. Let's take a look at that at bat, because that was, you would say, his most consequential of the night. That came in the 6th, as I said, against the righty Josh King. So he did have the righty-lefty advantage there. It was the 2-1 count, and he did get a pitch down and in, and he did, like I said, put a pretty good charge on it. and that would have been huge. 3-run homer right there would have, made it 5-3. Instead, fly out to left. The runners do not score, and the game moves on at that point. But then did hit a leadoff single in the 9th inning, just a nice little bloop hit to get in, or rather on base, and then came across to score for the first run, or the first of 2 runs in that 9th inning. Yandy Diaz tonight, he goes 2 for 3 with a walk, no strikeouts, 253 average. For him, a 388 on base. The slugging that always makes me laugh at 292. He's got a slugging 100 points lower than his on base, which just means singles and walks only. Again, he had 14 home runs in 2019. He has not hit a home run in like almost 60 games, going back to August of last year. So Yandy is in some kind of funk, at least with the power stroke. He hit only one home run with Cleveland before coming over to the Rays, so that was obviously the problem. It was just ground ball, but good exit velo. And the Rays acquired him with the thought process of, all right, we can get this exit velo, get the ball in the air, we're going to get line drive doubles, we're going to get home runs. And he did that in 2019. Again, the 14 home runs, and we'll never forget the two home run game in the AL wildcard game. I mean, that really defines Yandy Diaz as a baseball player, I think, that game, right? And so the lack of the home runs, instead of I find your lack of faith disturbing, I find your lack of home runs disturbing. A Star Wars reference for anyone still tuned in at 11:55 on this Friday night. But, he's getting on base, get on first, keep the line moving. He's been right smack dab in the middle of the lineup lately in the 5 spot. I would like him, in the leadoff spot, maybe, the 2, get him on base for some of the big boys, but he's basically just on first, and then have KK or Walls or whatever come up behind him. Did not come across the score tonight. But, he's on base 3 out of the 4 times he comes to the plate. You would think that that's an incredibly valuable asset, but, and I'm sure the numbers would back me up, it's not really generating anything. The most Yandy Diaz play ever is runners at the corners, and he walks. I mean, yes, it loads the bases, but it doesn't really do anything for you. It still requires someone else to do something, and so if the guys around him aren't hitting, then you're not going to get anything from him. You're just going to get a guy that's standing on first base all night. And funny enough that he is a first baseman, at least right now. Also, the Rays, I believe, are probably the only team left that do not have a home run from their first baseman all season, whether it's anyone playing first base on that given day. Yandy, Brasso, Yoshi Tsutsugo, for goodness sakes. G-Man Choi as well. His only home runs, I guess, must have come from the DH spot. So, I mean, that's more of a clerical thing, perhaps, than anything. But I think that serves mostly as an indictment of Yandy Diaz's lack of power lately. Singled with 1 out and the bases clear in the second against Kyle Gibson, the first base runner that they had against Gibson. And he was able to scoot over to second base with 2 outs, but could not come across the score with a Taylor Walls ground out. Grounded out to the pitcher to start the 5th. Hit a leadoff single in the 7th and was doubled off. Kevin Kiermaier, who tonight had a lot of good liners down the first base line. Kiermaier lined it right to Nate Lowe, and Yandy was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it, humorously just kind of stood there, like a stone statue, and just waited for Lowe to apply to apply the attack. So he was doubled off there in the 7th that erased the single. So I mean, if luck is a little bit different, we're talking a different situation, but my point remains the same. And then worked a walk in the 9th inning. It was, the leadoff single for Meadows, and the Yandy walk does make it first and second with nobody out, which really did make a big difference. And he was forced out on a fielder's choice by Kiermaier. Ran out of double play, did KK. And Yandy was kind of the sacrificial lamb and all that. So that was his night, and that's a very Yandy night. Getting on base a ton, but the Rays not able to really do anything with it. So that was his night. Kevin Kiermaier, 0 for 4, no walks, no strikeouts, 208 average. It's down to now, an on base of 264. looking at his night tonight, he grounded out in the second inning that moved Gandhi to second with 2 outs, flew out to center with 1 out, bases clear in the 5th, lined out, that ended up being that double play in the 7th, and then ran out basically a double play ball in the 9th. Had that hard liner to first in the 7th. Also in his at-bat in the 9th, had a screecher down the first base line that went just foul. And, of course, that would have changed some things as well. So an unlucky night at the plate for Kiermaier. And did not have a whole lot of action defensively. Speaking about of action defensively from the outfield, Austin Meadows made a good defensive play. He actually got an assist from the outfield where they were able to gun down Willie Calhoun for the final out of the 4th inning that put an end to a 3-run fourth for Texas. So shout out to Meadows for that. Taylor Walls tonight went 1 for 3 with a walk, no strikeouts, an average that's up to 206, 357 on base. Still very impressed with what he's done defensively. The switch hitting, nature is very valuable as well. So, just being patient with Walls right now. Grounded out with a man on second and 2 outs in the second inning. Hit a 2-out single in the 5th that the Rays did nothing with. Grounded out with the bases clear and 2 outs in the 7th. And in his most consequential at-bat of the night, maybe, which was runners at the corners and 1 out, he walked to load the bases in the 9th. So that was an at-bat where he got kind of screwed by Alfonso Marquez, the home plate ump. That was called a strike that wasn't a strike. He took the same pitch later in the at-bat for a ball, and then I believe he did it again for a ball. So a gutsy showing from Walls, and he's been nothing if not gutsy for sure. I've enjoyed kind of his spirit on the field, and again has been playing incredible defensively. Frankie Mejia Francisco goes 1 for 3 with a run scored at the plate. He scored on the 2-run homer for Lau in the 8th. No walks, a strikeout. 260 average for him right now, 321 on base. His numbers are down a bit, but are still good for what you're getting. Struck out looking in the 3rd, flew out to left with a man on first, 2 outs in the 5th. Hit a leadoff single in the 8th, and again came across to score, so that was good. And then was pinch hit for in the 9th inning by Manuel Margot, and that was interesting how they decided to turn the managerial wheels. And when Manuel Margot with the bases loaded flew out to right, so that was a little bit disappointing. He's been such a clutch hitter, especially late in games. But a 1 at bat sample size is not an end all be all. Another note about Mejia. He had a couple of really hard hit foul balls that were just foul of being home runs. Just foul, maybe not right, but I mean they were crushed, into the stands down the right field line. It was, and batted both from both sides of the plate, and he's been better as a righty bat. But he did have that grand slam from the left earlier in the season at Dunedin, and he could have done that against the righty Kennedy, but they put him to the bench. It was interesting, like I said, how they decided to play that 9th inning. I figured with first and second and nobody out in the 9th, they would have pinch hit Margot for maybe Kiermaier. But with KK, you had the righty-lefty advantage, and that's probably why they left him in. And he was lucky just to even run out the double play. And because with Barrasso pinch hitting earlier, the only players they had on the bench was Margot and Zunino. So they couldn't pinch hit really for an infielder at that point. Like Walls was going to have to hit whatever. And then the other interesting wrinkle as well, so they decide to pinch hit for the catcher, Mejia, fine. You have Zunino on the bench. Well, speaking of Zunino, in his career against Ian Kennedy, who was 4 for 11 with 2 homers, how do you not, I don't know, I don't want to run up a wall about this, but it's, how do you not put Zunino in there? But like I said earlier, Margot has been great in clutch situations, and that's probably the explanation. And also the speed on the base path, perhaps, because, with the bases loaded, the runner at first was the tying run, so you were going to need potentially another one. So maybe they wanted that speed, but either way, my point still stands, put it that way. And then, of course, how could you forget Brett Phillips, our beloved, 1 for 4 tonight with a 2-run single, no walks, 2 strikeouts, an average that's up to 225 and on base at 315. Looked good in right field as usual. Flew out to center in a 1-2-3 in the third. Struck out looking in that atrocious at bat I was mentioning earlier. That was a walk. It was a walk. It was a walk. I don't care what anyone tells me. I don't usually get bothered by stuff like that. That bothered me. I saw Marquez raise the fist for strike 3, and just my instincts, my reflex, I wrote a walk down on my scorebook because I was like, where the ball was, that was a walk. With 3 ball, it was a full count. It's just that one did bother me, and the fact that the next 2 guys singled, I mean, butterfly effect, yes, but that could have changed the game too. So that was unfortunate. He also struck out with a man on first and no outs in the 8th, and then of course in the 9th inning with the Rays down to their final out, and I believe, I can check this obviously. Just 1 strike against him. He had a 3-1 count, so I thought maybe a bases loaded walk perhaps, but he gets a fastball kind of middle in and pulls it kind of just like he did in Game 4 of the World Series for a 2 RBI single that made it runners at the corners with 2 outs in a 5-4 game, and then of course Brandon Lowe does what he does, and that ends the game. So that was really, really cool for Phillips to replicate that. Deja vu to me. One of my favorite moments as a Rays fan, of course, has got to be Game 4, so the walk-off. So great for Phillips that he did that, and I could not imagine what was going through his mind, because we know he does think about that stuff. He mentions it, to the press and everything, and he's not one of those players that doesn't want to give you anything. It's all business. No, he'll talk to you. He's a very down to earth guy. So he's just like us. So I really interested to hear maybe from him about that at bat, because that must have been kind of a whirlwind for him to do it again, in the same building against a different uniform and different situation. Yes, but there were 3 times as many fans there tonight than there was in the World Series, which is just ridiculous when you think about it. But that's just how it went. Talking about the pitching side, I guess thankfully we don't have much to discuss. Josh Fleming getting the loss. He's now 5-4 on the season. They ended up just kind of letting him wear it. I did not think he would go 7 innings, but he did. 5 runs on 10 hits, no walks, 2 strikeouts, the home run allowed, of course. He threw 100 pitches, 72 for strikes, so that's not a bad strike percentage, but you look at his first pitch strikes. He faced 31 batters, threw a first pitch strike to only 16 of them, so that's right at about 50%. Obviously, 16 times 2 is 32, so that's right above 50%. So that's definitely not good enough, especially for a guy like Fleming. He was saying on it wasn't on the pregame show, but they had it on the pregame show on the radio side. Fleming saying that his game plan last time against Texas was just to get early and count outs, and that he was just going to go out and do the same thing because the batters that he faced were really aggressive, swinging at stuff that they shouldn't have, weak contact. I think he had 5, it seemed like, assists were, comebackers to the mound that were made outs on. Speaking of that start at the Trop in early April or, mid-April, went 5+, so went into the 6th, but did not get an out in the 6th, and only allowed a run. Got into some trouble there in the 6th, but they were not allowed to score by the next guy that came in. So he had a much better start then. Just got knocked around. Like I said, Same thing with Yarbrough. It's going to happen. He's not a guy that's going to pitch up and in, maybe like Yarbs. Did get some. He was rolling there for a little bit. I mean, got through the first 2 innings scoreless, and he was at his best. I mean, against the top of the order. Put the top 3 guys down in order in the first. Had a 1-2-3 in the 6th. But outside of that, I mean, it was just trouble. In a road loss, you only have to pitch 8 innings. The fact that he gives you 7, when you're down 5-0 most of the game, I think that's a good thing. And of course, with the complete game that we'll talk about more tomorrow night from Yarbs, the bullpen that was not in good shape, and you add, the return of Sheriff and all this is great. Castillo hasn't pitched since Sunday. Fireisen, Fairbanks, Thompson, Kittredge, Springs even, maybe even McHugh, Michael Walker, if they want to, are all ready to go now. And you get an off day on Monday, and you're facing last place teams right now in Texas, and then also next week in Washington and Baltimore. So, games where your starters probably should be going deep. So, I think we were worried with the bullpen during that New York series, but I think the fortunes are turning a little bit. And Fleming's start tonight, I think, does have a pretty decent deal to do with that. Just gave up a lot of singles, but that's what he's going to do. He wants that. He wants to make contact. The guys to make contact, but it's supposed to be weak contact. Some of them were singles that were just finding the holes, and that's just going to happen. But there was some kind of line drives and such, and but was able to work around it. What was amazing to me was that he allowed, I think, 7 hits through the first 5 innings. A lot of base runners. Only threw 60 pitches to get through those 5 innings with all those base runners and giving up 5 runs. Like, to me, that's insane. I mean, Blake Snell could have a no-hitter through 4 or through 5 and be at like 100 pitches, it seems like. And Fleming got, 7 hits through 5 and was only at 60. So that just goes to show you most of those at-bats were like hitting off the first or second or third pitch. But mostly the way it went, he started off hitters, half the time 1-0, then 2-0, and then maybe 2-1, and then a single, kind of stuff like that, where Texas batters were allowed to kind of hunt certain pitches and kind of sit back and wait for their pitch to come. That's not his strategy. When Fleming is at his best, you're taking strike 1, maybe you chase at strike 2, you're down 0-2, and then it's just a weak grounder to first. And then that's where he's really, cooking. But obviously, because of the control issues and everything, was not able to put out that kind of performance. So that is what it is. Again, and then Ryan Sheriff, of course, in his 1 inning of work, 8 pitches, 6 strikes, was 3 for 3 with the first pitch strikes. Got a little bit lucky. Nick Solak, former Ray, was 3 for 3 with 3 singles, and then lined, hit it, as Andy Fried said, right on the screws, right to Joey Wendell for a line drive, but then got Lowe and Culberson. Culberson, by the way, has 6 runs batted in against the Rays this year, has 6 runs batted in against the rest of Major League Baseball this year, which is incredible. But did get some weak ground balls, and like I said, lefty specials for sure. Look forward to seeing him maybe even be a part of the late inning bullpen. So that's it. We turn the page. It's a new day. It is a new day, and it's 12:13 in the morning here on this early Saturday morning. I've got work in about 12 hours, all that exciting stuff. But our plan for our show, we are going to be tomorrow's game is at 4:05 Eastern. That game will probably wrap around 7. We're not going to go on right after the game ends. We're going to be on at about 10:30. Make sure you're following us at WHBC Official on Twitter. Follow the show on Spreaker.com where you're listening, of course, so you can get the show, because we're going to be talking about tomorrow's game, of course, We're going to talk about that game in New York, the complete game for Yarborough, all that good stuff. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But tomorrow's game, and by the way, Texas, last place team in the AL West, they have clinched the season series against the Tampa Bay Rays. They won that 4-game set and they dropped 3 games to 1, and they take game 1 of a best of 3. So, the Rays, no matter what they do, they're going to lose the season series to the Texas Rangers, which, you want to talk about leaving some meat on the bone, but I digress. Tomorrow at 4:05, it is the lefty Rich Hill against the lefty Colby Allard. We'll start with the Rays pitching side first. Rich Hill, and we'll talk about him and do him some justice. Hopefully he puts out a good start as well, obviously. But was pitcher of the month in the month of May and had an ERA under 1 in that month in his 6 starts and was absolutely incredible. Had a career high in strikeouts, 13 of which in over 8 innings at home against KC and all that good stuff. So the 41-year-old left-hander is 4-2 on the year. He's got his ERA all the way down to 3.32. I mean, it was over 8 in April. It's already down to 3.32. His last time out against the New York Yankees, he only threw 50 pitches and got only 5 innings. Scoreless, 3 hits, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. But I believe that the time before that was the 8 inning against KC. So I believe Cash just wanted to take it easy on him. But he looked terrific in that game. He has seen the Rangers so far this year, but that was before he got things straightened out. And in fact, after that start, he had an ERA of 7.53. In that start against Texas, went 4 1/3, 4 runs on 7 hits, 2 homers, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. So he was not really fooling anyone. I think it's going to be much different now. I don't think Texas is a great matchup for him, though. I think Fleming's performance was kind of proof of that. I mean, Rich Hill really is just a 2-pitch pitcher, but technically he's got 3, the fastball and the cutter with the curveball as well. I think they're going to sit curveball probably and, hunt fastballs and cutters, which, easier said than done, of course. If he can get the curveballs called for strikes, that might be good. Obviously, it will be good. Fleming doesn't really have a pitch like that, like a big looper that's hard to make contact against if it's a strike. So that will probably be the difference maker. So outside of that, let's say Rich Hill goes 6. You get 1 from Thompson, and again, if it's you're losing, you only have to cover 8 innings. But let's say they have to cover 9, and we hope it's a win. So Hill goes 6. You get 1 from Thompson to get you through 7. Fairbanks 8. Castillo maybe in the 9th, but also Fire Eisen, Kittredge, Springs. Are all available. I don't believe Michael Wacha would pitch, but he certainly could if they wanted to do a tandem start. And so that everyone again is available. They've done a great job of kind of giving the bullpen some time to rest. Colby Allard is going for the Texas Rangers. The 23-year-old left-hander this season has a 3.38 earned run average and a record of 1-1. His last time out against the Seattle Mariners went 4 innings, 2 runs on 2 hits, 2 homers, a walk, 4 strikeouts. He has an appearance against the Rays, but it was a relief appearance. He went just 1 inning scoreless and struck out the side on April the 13th. So I'm curious as to see who he faced in that game, April 13th. And Colby Allard pitched the 9th inning, and he struck out Adames, who's no longer with the team, of course, Phillips, and Zunino. So a much different thing for Colby Allard than the last time we saw him. I think that's a little bit interesting, but I suppose that a necessity, or maybe it was the plan for him. He's only 23 years old, so part of the youth movement now that the team is down under 80s rocks sound reference. You get my point. So lefty they've been terrible against lefty pitching this year, so probably stack the righties. I would probably go Randy in left, Kiermaier in center, Margot in right, and then in the infield, third to first, probably. If they want to go heavy righties, they can. They could go Brasso at third, Walsey at short, Lau at second, and Yandy at first. If they want Lau out of the lineup, they could do Wendell at third, Brasso at second, Yandy at first as well. Probably Zunino to catch, and the DH could also be Brasso potentially. I don't think it would be Phillips or Meadows. Meadows is probably who you would DH. So that would be my guess. So, like I said, 4:05 first pitch tomorrow afternoon. We will be on the air at around 10 o'clock or so, where we'll talk about that game. We'll talk about the finale in New York with the Yarbrough complete game, all that stuff. So we hope that you tune in then. Again, make sure you're following us on Twitter at WHBC Official. Follow this show page on Spreaker.com where you're listening, so that way you don't miss the show whenever it comes out. But anyone listening from the Rays Reddit page, the Rays Discord server, we appreciate you tuning in and listening here on this Friday night. Hoping to have some callers here, as we always do. It's great to have some of you, the fans, as part of the show. But yes, we look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow. Hopefully it will be after a Rays win, and as always, we'll see you then.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM and Sports Radio 66. The Fan.
HBC